this is update for November 21, 2022, day 271 of the war and of the date update. As always, I'm going to start with strategic general topics, and I'm going to discuss that housing sort of price prediction. It's not even tool, it's just, I think it's just logical sort of thinking. And then we're going to walk through the front line. So let's start with macroeconomic news and specifically energy. So first of all, what's going on with Russian export of crude? As everybody knows, they will be starting, I think, December 5th. There will be a ceiling. Russia clearly stated today that they're not going to supply crude oil under the ceiling. So which means that they said that they'd rather sit on it and not supply to the world market, which obviously will increase prices for crude oil. Just for the reference, Russia used to export 1.6 million barrels per day to Europe, and Russian production is about 11.5 million barrels per day. So it's about a little bit more than 10%, like probably like 14% or something, plus minus. But now Europe takes 0.6, and it has all chances to go to zero. At the same time, as I mentioned before, Russia is still supplying a lot of crude to China. It's a recent number came out from China, actually. It's slightly above 1 million barrels per day, and it grew 3.4% months on months. So basically October versus September of this year. And then it grew 16.2% year on year, which means October of 22 versus October of 21. As you can see, the increase is actually not that huge, but still, it's China is will be a large consumer of the Russian oil. Remains to be seen what's going to happen to India, where it's also close to 1 million barrels per day. So just kind of like, what's the effect of this whole ceiling on Russia, on Russian economy, and Russian finances? So if and I mentioned this before, probably in April and May, if Russia does not export this 1.6 million barrels per day, and it's already not exporting, it's 0.6 left, it's essentially helping to keep the price of crude oil up, right? So it's kind of like involuntary cut to the world oil production and world oil supply. So it's actually there are calculations that show clearly, and Russia sort of has those that, well, they did it actually, so that it's actually more beneficial to cut production, and Russia will have pretty much the same amount of money and spending sort of less effort producing, right? So this is like sort of monopoly power, right? Monopolists never interested in increasing production because there's no point. You can get the same or even more by actually keeping it steady or reducing. So why to sort of spend any effort? And that's why this whole policy on fighting Russian supply of energy resources is actually completely counterproductive. But it looks like this is turning into some kind of, fanatical cult in the West, and so that will lead to even more negative results in the Western economies. So it will be interesting to see what's going to happen on after December 5th, because there might be some fireworks. At the same time, European traders are trying to procure as much of Russian crude and diesel as possible. So there might be some period of time where results are not immediately visible. Maybe it could be like a 1 month lag before we're going to start seeing results of that. And by the way, the uh, Saudi Arabia is sort of called this way, playing along with Russia, because it's in their interest to they also to keep crude oil prices high. And they just if you've seen on the news that they mentioned that there's no any kind of increase in supply from OPEC coming. So again, all of this is leading is will keep inflation high and cost of living high, and will lead to reduction in living standards. And as I said before, that leads eventually to social unrest and potentially really negative outcomes. Let's just see how for example, this constrained Russian energy supply they affecting Europe in major way. So, for example, German steel production fell almost 7% year on year. So, to be precise, 6.9%. Cumulative drop for the first 10 months, so basically January through October of this year, relative to January through October of the previous year. So that's not small number. Then actually there is more sort of problem in all of this steel sector. Essentially, Russian export of steel stopped in October of this year. So what happened is in September, Russian export fell by 43%, uh, and then it fell even more in October. However, Russian authority decided, because the numbers are so bad, they decided not to stop releasing the data, basically. But that really means that the numbers are completely disastrous. So essentially, the Russian steel is close to be wiped out from the world steel market. Again, that's also reducing supply. Uh, while the so and then like if we just think about where does steel go, the largest users are obviously construction industry and auto manufacturing, right? So while we see sort of reduction in demand, especially in construction, because the interest rates are really affecting real estate around the world, and specifically in the West. So, but at the same time, you see also that there is huge amount of the of supply is also wiped out. So those, so we can just even look kind of like look in this specific situation how this increases in interest rates, they uh, they don't achieve the same effect as what they could have if Russian supply of natural resources remained on the market. So as you can see, the construction industry obviously, reducing significantly consumption, right? To some extent, probably auto manufacturing, but at the same time, huge chunk, because Russia is one of the largest producers of steel in the world. Don't remember the ranking, but it's definitely like probably top five. So as you can imagine, that's a huge amount. And so this again balances. So the prices for, let's say, cars are not going to drop. There won't be more sort of steel to make sort of cheaper, more cars. And the same for the construction industry. So the prices will of this raw material or inputs will remain elevated. So that really means there is not really much of any reduction in inflation. Again, so this is in turn means that let's say Federal Reserve need to increase interest rates even more to basically to achieve some result. Because if they increase even more, okay, Russian steel is out. So at that point, it's really there's not much of sort of other suppliers sort of falling out, and then they may achieve some results. But that really also means significant economic pain in the U.S. and around the world, because Federal Reserve basically sets interest rates for the world with its policy. Even though technically nobody will ever say this, but that's just practical reality of the this central bank run world that we're living in. Um, so so that's the situation with Russian steel. And in terms of Russian sort of losses from it, so the steel manufacturing is about 18% of the industrial production. So as you can imagine, that's like another huge blow, and that translates to about 5% of GDP. So as you can imagine, that's another additional 5% of GDP. Well, not all of that, goes to export, but let's say it's at least, 50, 60, 70% of it goes, I would say more closer probably to 70% of it goes to export. So that's a huge also blow to Russian GDP. And again, the situation in Russian state finances will be exponentially getting worse with the time, especially after New Year. And for that reason, Russian president and Russian government decided to open up all of those sort of slashed funds or staved funds, state funds that sort of they were saved for sort of future generations or whatever the sort of declared noble name is, but reality is they're going to be used as emergency for this sort of developing financial disaster and economic disaster in Russian economy. Actually, one more news on this time natural gas supply. So if you remember, some time ago, German, I think, minister went, or actually chancellor, I don't remember, to be fair, 2 or 3 months ago, went to Qatar, which is, I think, number 3 producer of natural gas in the world, and tried to secure supply of natural gas to Germany and failed. So actually, and then China went and had negotiations with Qatar and actually managed to secure supply of LNG. It's 4 million tons per year. That translates to about 6 billion cubic meters. It's not a huge number. Just for the reference, like European market is about 400 billion cubic meters. So that's just, but this just kind of like sets a tone. And the reason why Qatar actually decided to supply this LNG to China, because they decided to sign long-term contract, I think like 25-year long contract. And so this is, again, the message is very loud and clear from, let's say, energy producers in Persian Gulf, where they feel like there is a war on them from the West. So they quietly supporting, let's say, China and Russia, even though Russia typically was their like fierce competitor, right? They were fighting all the time, but now it's effectively a united bloc that is fighting the West, and this is another sort of result of failed policies in the West that actually undermines West and Western economy, and potentially will lead to very disastrous consequences in the West. So this is now a little bit about this whole macroeconomy, and the reason I'm talking, just for those who don't know much, I talk so much about macroeconomy because it really drives everything else, including politics, because politics is just derivative of the economics or economy, what's going on in the economy, because basically those political economical forces are being expressed through political system, essentially, because they everywhere around the world, large businesses finance politicians, and then they sort of speak largely, with the goal of interest of the large businesses. Some people will say, no, it's not true. They care about people. No, that's just if we're all honest, it's just a lip service, just populist, talk to kind of keep the rest, the population kind of like under the impression that they have, significant influence. But it's always large economic interests that really drive the politics in every country. Now let's actually look at this housing situation, why things will get really not nice, let's put this way. And I just kind of want to explain this framework for analysis. So I used U.S. I used U.S. because, as I mentioned before, it's one of the best economies with the best statistical information, with the most open, free, best quality, and everything. I'm not saying there's always room for improvement, but relative to the rest of the world, it's really the best. So what I used is basically data about the mortgage rates. So U.S. is using 30-year mortgage. That's kind of like uh, typical mortgage in the U.S. To buy a house. It's a fixed rate, 30-year fixed rate. So let's just look at what happened to interest rates, right? So the sort of one of the lower number was 2.77 for 30-year fixed. It was around end of 2020. Here I think December 31st, and then it started slowly picking up and really picked up in 2022, as you can see, right? So the highest that we reached was 7.32. So you see from 277 to 732, right? So this is your, call it, bottom and peak, right? Of this right now, it's a little bit down to, as you can see here, 664, right? So this is just kind of like gives you kind of like understanding of where interest rates are going, basically. And so now let's actually look how it works in terms of sort of financial mechanics when you buy a house. So let's say you have a house, that's you buying that's worth $700,000. And for all intents and purposes, I'm assuming that all of this house is debt financed. So basically, you're not putting any equity. And in the US, you can do that. Basically, there's like I think loans with like 3.5% down equity. So essentially, it's like no equity. But so we just, for simplicity, just to make it easier, right? So we had interest rates at the sort of lowest level at 2.77%, right? It's a 30-year, so it's 360 months. And so if you calculate what's the monthly payment that the person who buys a house has to pay for this house, is this is, you can see, $2,865 per month. That's what the person needs to pay per month for 30 years to pay it off completely, right? So that's a $700,000. So this is at the peak. So this is the highest because interest rates are inversely related to the prices of to the housing prices, right? So and really, if you really think about how to basically value the house, in many ways it's irrelevant about the house. You at the high abstract level, all this house is a bunch of payments, right? Over time. So it's a kind of like, think about it as a coupon bond, right? That or I guess one that's amortizes. So basically, you pay down both principal and interest over time. So just from financial perspective, it's purely just like just a bond, essentially, right? So and then for that we know the sort of coupon payments, which is this one, $2,865 per month. So this is what we had. Now let's look what happens when. So you have this, coupon payments of $2,865, right? Now, if interest rates go to this 7.32%, the value, if you discount all of these payments that you will receive, which is this, as I said, they will only what you get is 417,000, and that's really new value of your house, essentially. I don't know if I'm explaining it well enough for everyone, but basically this is if you assume these payments, monthly payments, and you discount them at this higher interest rates, and because it's higher than the value of each payment discounted. Present value is lower, so you're getting lower present value for the loan, and the loan really is the value of the house, right? So as you can see now, the value of the house goes down to $417,000, which is 40% down, right? So we have at the lowest prices. So whatever we've seen, there is a very important sort of I would say detail about all of this is that real estate market is sort of like very slow and very lagging. I would say probably like a year lag or so. So let's say we reached this super low interest rates in end of December of 2020. The really like peak in houses was probably reached also like roughly like I would say December 2021 and the beginning of 2022. So lag maybe year and whatever 3-4 months, right? so this is so that's why we need to understand this important point. So now, once we reached this very high interest rates, right? Well, I don't know if they high or not because it's not objective. I mean, they're not set objectively by the market. They basically set by the policies of the Federal Reserve. So you cannot even say if they're objective or they high or not high. We actually don't even know. It's just what we have. Let's put it this way. So as you can see, this will. So once we reach this high number, this number 7.32, it will take about a year and a half for the housing prices to actually reflect. So basically, from 700,000 that we reached, let's say in December slash April timeframe of this year, to go back to this 417 that I show under this interest rates, it again will take at least a year and a half. So this number 417 will see end of 2023. So that's just more how I even maybe early of beginning of 2024. And that's obviously assumes that the interest rates will remain in somewhere in this area, right? So, and that really also assumes that the Federal Reserve stays the course and keeps interest rates where they are right now, and actually they will slightly increase them. The reason why they probably will keep it that way is because, as I show you many times, inflation will remain elevated because of all of this, I would say, erroneous economic policies, and specifically fighting energy supply, not just Russian, because there is a fight against energy supply in the US, then I mentioned recently in the UK as well. So it's really, unfortunately in the West, there's basically crusade against the conventional energy, which also means it's a crusade against basically current standard of living for the most people. And the sad reality of it that those who pay will be in the lower sort of economic strata, not the top. It always will be paid by the sort of middle class and people who are lower than middle class. So again, if this remains, and it's very likely that this remains, the prices will drop under this scenario by about 40%. However, there is actually a little bit of a twist to all of this, because it's not only that interest rates went up. There is also a problem that's related to inflation, right? So because I mentioned before that inflation is about, let's say, just number like 15%, and the wages went up by about 5%. So the negative loss is about 10%. So in terms of purchasing capability of the average sort of consumer, so really that reduces, makes it even worse. So this payment 2.8 thousand goes to roughly 2.6, and then this is how much people can pay because their budgets are eaten by inflation, so they have less disposable income to spend on the house. Basically, that's a logic why it goes down. And so this is actually down by 10%, but from 2.8 to 2.5, it's down by 10%, right? So then your house is then worth is even less, $375,000. So roughly, basically, close to reduction in price by two times, right? So this is kind of like negative effect not only from interest rates but also from inflation. So you're getting like double, as a consumer, you're getting double hit by the two forces. So as you can see, this whole scenario is actually much worse than what was happening in 2008 during that whatever financial disaster that happened in 2008, 9, and then housing crash. Because I think numbers for that time period was about 30%. So as you can see, what we're looking into is going to be much worse than 2008 based on this analysis. Um, so then I just kind of looked at okay, right now the rates went a little bit down, 6.64%. So I just used 6.64. So that gives us a little bit better result. Like the prices will go down by 36%, and then if you include inflation, they will go down by 43%. So as you can see, the bottom line, things are not looking great at all. And the another sort of big problem of all of this is that in the West and even in China, people use their this increasing value of their houses as basically ATM. So what happens is, because let's say you had the house was this 400,000, now it's 700,000, right? So you got the extra 300,000 in value, and basically equity, right? But it's kind of like a fake equity, because it's not really, because it didn't happen for natural reasons. It's because there is increase in the supply of credit in the economy generally, right? Due to the actions of the central banks, in this case, Federal Reserve. So people feel like, okay, I've got more wealth here. I would like to extract this part of this fake equity, right, and spend it on whatever the people want to do. And so now, as the housing prices go down, they will not have this extra cushion from this equity, because the equity actually going to be getting sort of wiped out. And so not only they will spend less because they like current income is eaten by inflation, but they also will not be able to use this equity in extraction of equity or conversion of equity in the house into spending power. So it's going to be very hard hit to the economy from many angles, right? Similar, like inflation and increased interest rates. So uh, that's why this whole increase in interest rates, while it's, I would say, desperation measure on one hand, but it may, in a year or so, it may lead to very I would say catastrophic results in the West and around the world. To be fair, because it's so we all live, even we all live in one world, one connected world. Even right now, it starts to sort of fall apart into basically kind of like islands, separated islands, but it's still significantly interconnected. So hopefully this helps viewers with understanding where we're heading and why this whole thing is not just some abstract discussion about, like, well, this fell, that fell, and you know and but everyone will manage to sort of survive this. No, it's probably going to affect pretty much everyone of us in some way or fashion in the coming year. So at the same time, this is not to sort of be gloomy and doomy, because one of the viewers sort of wrote to me that I'm very pessimistic. It's actually very incorrect understanding, because it's more in there is a saying, if you are informed, you are armed, and you have chance of actually avoiding disaster. So that's the whole point of all of this. It doesn't mean that, like, okay, let's just all collectively die and that's it. No, it's actually opposite of that. You know once you know what sort of might happen and what's coming, you at least can change your course, whatever you can do to avoid disaster, and not to buy a sort of ticket on a Titanic. Now let's actually switch to Ukraine a little bit. In terms of the energy distribution infrastructure, and the whole energy situation is terrible in Ukraine, remains terrible. In its true sort of way, Ukrainian sort of president, or this, basically his what's called office of the president, basically his Yermak and his henchmen. So they came out and said, people, to citizens of Ukraine, please don't leave, don't go west, and don't escape the country, basically, because of all of this. And that's the, they true to themselves that they will, like, any advice they give should be followed with 180 degree sort of different approach. So if you hear go left, then go right, because they all these people do is about their personal self-preservation at the expense of the others. There are reports that there might be additional 3 million refugees from Ukraine, because of the if this energy distribution system will collapse completely, because right now it's on the edge, and it may still collapse from the amount of the wounds. It's basically like, almost like, think about this: you are heavily wounded soldier in the hospital, and so you may still die because of the cumulative effect of all of the wounds that you got, and especially because the winter coming, and it will be much harsher on the equipment. So that's a situation with the energy distribution network. Now let's actually walk through the battlefield in a clockwise fashion, starting from the north. So the situation along the state border, more or less the same, exchange of artillery fire, but nothing extreme, nothing intense there. Now let's jump to North Luhansk front line. Things here are pretty much extremely predictable, the same. Ukrainian attacks in the same area. By the way, I just want to note, it's the same primitive strategy and tactic that Russian side deploys. Continuous attacks in the same place, at the same defensive positions, where your enemy is prepared, and you just, like, your forces, waves are eliminated time by time and time. So it's essentially, like, really reminds mindless, I would say, asinine approach of the World War One. And both sides are, so that's why I'm saying that both sides are basically smaller Soviet armies, and they just repeat all of its sort of bad practices of the Soviet army. So as you can see, again, attacks in the same areas, some Russian counterattacks again in the same area, but the end result is the status quo and no changes here. Now let's move south. Let's see what's going on North Donbass front line. Here things are pretty active, as you can see. Wagner mercenaries really actively attacking, and there are some reports, basically, that Ukrainian commanders got killed. So I think there was a report that battalion commander from 53rd Brigade here got killed, and even the commander of the brigade got killed. And then there's Ukrainian militia battalion is somewhere here as well. I don't put it here because it's impossible to track them, but that commander got killed as well. So this really tells that Ukrainian defensive defenses here are under extreme strain, and there is a high chance of them sort of failing basically here in the Bakhmut area. Whether it happens is unclear, but it's very clear that the situation is extremely dramatic, specifically on the Ukrainian side in this whole area. Basically, and as you can see, actually, there's a little bit of a sort of new approach by Wagner mercenaries. They trying to attack from this salient that they created about like a month or 2 months ago now, sort of trying to sort of kind of create this flanking pressure on Ukrainian troops here. No reports of sort of any major sort of breaches, but that's how it works on this front line here. That there's nothing for a couple weeks, and then sudden sort of a big crash. Then there wasn't much immediately south of Bakhmut, but then there were some attempts by Wagner mercenaries against the Kurdumuk. Again, no achievement there either. Now let's check central Donbass front line. So it was somewhat active. Russian troops continuing their attempts to expand this Pisky salient. No success there. Some again attacks in Marinka with basically it's like like Russian troops gained like 50 meters. It's again essentially nothing, and no achievements here in Novomikhailivka. So as you can see, this pretty much also the same pattern, same locations, wave after wave, and it's just basically a death factory in both sides, because the tops on the both sides are extremely incompetent and the product of the Soviet system. Let's finish with the Zaporizhya front line, which is quiet. No updates here. Pretty sure that both sides are bringing more troops to this area, in expectation of major Ukrainian offensive, and then potentially Russian counteroffensive, as I said, sometime in January, if not earlier. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow. Bye bye.